was working on it for about an hour, Fred.
Yeah, I know. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. We're live.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, folks, we're finally live. And one way I can get to her was I had to call her on the phone and everything. So right now we're going to do the thing, and she's going to be on the phone squealing, and I'm going to be on this end squealing. And what the process of this interview is going to be I'm going to be asking questions to her on her research area and how she goes about doing it and tips and everything. So, Lorianne, can you tell me about yourself?
Well, I about when it, well, we used to have a rock store here in Berkeley. I lived in the Bay Area, and there was a guy who used to go collect rocks, and that he somehow had got a hold of Patterson's books, and I got Roger Patterson's book, and there just out of interest. And then at some point he had the Gimlin film, which played over and over again at his shop. So every time we would go to the rock store next door, we'd go look at it. Well, I don't know what I ever thought of it because I was about maybe 12 back then. So I always probably thought that it was a creature that existed but no longer existed. You know how you see some of those things? And never thought about it ever again. And then years later, I worked training horses, and I go to different ranches for different breeders, start their foals, do the 3 months, 90 days, what they call training.
Right.
And anyway, I had just moved to a place, and we hadn't set up the facility, so I was training an apprentice who was a friend of mine, and her parents owned a place up in Mendocino County. Well, actually, I don't know if that's Mendocino, Fort Bragg area.
Right.
And anyway, that's up north. If people don't know, it's probably about an hour or so from Wolf Creek area, and it's a farming area. And so we rented their vacation home, which also had a barn and had full facility of 2 arenas and what all. So we had thought we were going to be there a month, and it ended up about 3 months. This was in about 2001. And about 3 months after we had started there, we started having strange things happen. And that's when I started learning that there were actually creatures other than the ones we knew about. And that's kind of when I started getting into it. And without even knowing I was actually doing researching, I guess I was. Because one thing that I do that I've always done is I've always kept a journal on each horse I train and every day what I need to work on, what certain animals have certain strengths and blah, blah, blah. Well, at some point, I don't know exactly when, maybe about after a month into it, I started jotting down things that I noticed and things that were happening. And, keeping notes.
Right.
Because at first I thought and this is way out, pretty far from a lot of people. I mean, you'd have to be out of, really going off the grid even to find where we're at. This big ranch had sectioned off and sold out a certain area. And there were only about 9 neighbors. And it backed up to like parkland, but not public parkland.
Right.
Parkland. And so, we were actually 2 houses from the end of the street. And the houses, we had one house backed up to us next door, and the other house was so far down, you could see it, but the houses were pretty separated.
Right.
But without knowing it, I was, like I said, that were happening and things we've heard, strange anomalies going. You know, which basically one of the things was we had a lot of elves in that area.
Right.
And actually saw the elves and stuff. And after the 3 months that we were, you know, there, they seemed to kind of disappear. But we didn't see them, but we were hearing elves, you know. And that was really odd because they weren't really freaked out. There was one that used to within 4 feet from you in the tree, in the back, you know, in the back of the house. You could see right from the kitchen.
Well, let me ask you a question. When you heard them owls, did you notice a difference from when you heard it twice? The sound like a higher tone or a lower tone or a deeper tone?
Not at first, and then didn't really notice a lot of things about it. But I did notice one thing about it was they would just happen. I mean, and then when we go to certain areas of the property, then you would hear them like they were talking back and forth. And I was going, well, you know, elves do that, you know. But I go, gee, that's strange that they didn't do this before. And they're not showing themselves. In fact, you don't even see them now. They've like almost disappeared, you know, which was really odd. And then the animals started acting strangely too. And, you know, and just some odd things. And I was going, gee, I wonder if somebody's messing with us. And my ex came to the property and he installed sensor lights, and we had a sodium light that was by the house. And they would go on and off for no reason. And just some strange things would go on. And in fact, I've written about it and posted it on my page quite a few times. One of the things that I had noticed really strange one time, you know, and it's scary to think about, but my girlfriend and I would go real early in the morning. It'd be still dark. And we'd pull blankets, and we had a regular schedule weekend. And we have a big, like, bathtub that is on concrete slab that's in front of the barn.
Right.
You know, we're bathing and what all. And we never use, the horses never use it because basically they're not in that area. They're, you know, in the pasture area or in the arena area or in the stalls. But I guess it's when you're right after you've taken a ride, you can stop there. And I'm cleaning it out all the time and refilling it. And like we'd go in the barn and come out. This happened 2 times. And
does
completely filthy.
Does
like mop marks on, you know, like somebody slapped a mop.
Yeah.
Well, look at them good. They always, to God, I had. Because it happened a couple of times until we put up the lights and stuff.
Right. How does your...
It didn't happen anymore.
All right. How does your...
I think it was like footprints.
How does your horses react when they come around?
Well, I have, my one horse had traumatized. So she would totally freak out. The weather got real nice. I hated to keep them in the barn. So we turn them in a large, I didn't ever put them in pasture, in a large paddock area, which is kind of on the side in the front by the road of the house.
Right.
And a few nights, I heard like it sounded like thunder running. So I go out there with my flashlight, and the horses are running around snorting. And I go, well, something, a predator or something is coming to the property. You know, a bobcat, you know, a bobcat could be a dog, but I mean, dogs don't really scare them. And our dogs would have gone out with it because our dogs go loose. But it was really funny. Our dogs stayed on the porch all the time, or under the porch.
Well, they
they didn't when we first got there, but then they really, it got worse than that. But anyway, they would run, and you know, people were saying how they played. You couldn't even get near my horses. And then when my horses were doing that, and I'd go out there to get them, I couldn't even get close enough to touch her. She would be so freaked out. And so I decided to start putting them in the barn and locking up the barn at night.
Have you ever
and
have you ever seen them? Have you ever seen tracks or anything inside the barn?
Never saw any inside the barn, but once it's locked up, you can't really get in. And I don't think they went in at night because it was closed up.
Yeah, when I was talking to Scott Carpenter, he said he knew someone who had feed in a barn, and he kept noticing that the feed kept coming up. A lot of feed was coming up missing, so he decided to lock the door and padlock it.
Nothing had happened with us except for we didn't keep the feed in the barn. We kept it in a feed bin,
right?
Which is a metal thing, and it has a slanted lid on the side of the barn.
Yeah, no, we
didn't keep that locked. We did not keep that locked. But I didn't start. I don't usually feed grain when I'm starting a colt because it makes them too high.
Yeah.
And so, like about the third month, they start losing weight because you start putting more pressure on them.
Right.
Start eating what they call a cob mix.
Yeah.
It's oats, corn, and barley, and molasses. And we put about 2 bags in that bin because the bin wasn't real big. And then almost immediately that started disappearing. So I put like a latch, like a clip latch on it. And the clip latch broke off. I mean, it wasn't just, it was like yanked off and broke. It wasn't even unclipped. And I go, wow, how did, could have been there. It takes a lot of strength to do that.
Well, like I said when I was talking,
yeah. Go ahead.
Like I said when I was talking to Scott Carpenter, he said the guy padlocks his door to the barn to keep. And he said he come back the next day and the barn door was out in the field. Squatches.
The barn door clips itself, but it's one of those that you lift up and slide across and lift down.
Yeah.
And it's got a piece that goes over.
Right.
So I don't think they ever figured it out, and they didn't really try to mess with it. But the feed was on the outside of the barn.
Oh.
And, in a bin because it goes fill it easier,
Right.
And because we buy it in bulk. It's hard to explain, but they come and fill it for you. And anyway, after that, we put like a chain on it. Well, we never had a problem. We went away for a night to go someplace to some meeting, whatever. And we had come back, and I went to check on the animals, and that bin, the chain was swanted because it went around it.
Right.
And the edges of the corners of the bin were bent completely up. And it had access in there and got in the food. So, and the reason I said no footprints is because it's pretty much, it was on concrete slab, cement. But even around the house, behind the house, and actually, if you sat at the house, the edge of the trees, you could see through the other side of the trees. So it wasn't like a big forest. I've been a couple of different, for fruit trees.
Yeah.
And there were still around. There are a lot of walnut trees, and there were like an apple. My parents had an apple tree on property that was still there. The other ones had been cut up down when they in the house. But there was one there, and there were the big thing that we had was a neighbor that was closest to us. She was kind of eccentric. She had a big cyclone fence, and tons of blackberries. I mean, they were so wild. They grew to about, they could fit in the palm of my hand, a blackberry. I mean, if you could put, they were so, you've never seen, and the taste was incredible.
Yeah.
We had tons of blackberries.
Have you, out there on your place, smelled, like, molasses or something, a weird smell whenever they're around?
I've gone to this before. There's a few things that I didn't experience there, and there's some few kind of neat things that I did experience. One of the things was not the smell, because it smelled there. I mean, the smell was really strong because we were near the creek, and it had like a lot of leaves. You know, you couldn't even see when you walked through there footprints of any animals.
Right.
You know, because, I mean, you could, you know, we'd walk down into the creek. There were a lot of crawdads in there and stuff. And anyway, there's a lot of, I'm sure there were fish. It was a big creek back then. Now it's dried up. But anyway, I, never in my mind thought about looking for footprints, because I never thought about it at the time, but now I do look for footprints. I do look for stick structures, without thinking of it. And I have some pictures that I had taken while I was there, and it structures without thinking. I wasn't taking pictures of the stick structures. I was just taking a picture of the area. It was a really beautiful area. When we rode through I took some pictures, and without thinking it, I go, wow, that could be a stick structure. That's an awful big. That's not a knocked over tree, because it's broke up at a certain point and it's broken, and it's bigger than 6 inches in diameter. That I don't see anything that came down on it.
Okay. When you notice like you found small trees that are snapped, like directional. Have you ever noticed that they have a slight twist to the left or to the right?
I've never really looked at them close up like that, but they did look twisted. And I actually probably have a couple pictures. I'll have to look back. But I never, at the time, I wasn't doing any research, and I didn't know what was happening, what was going on, and, there. And my girlfriend didn't know anything about it. And apparently, her parents only vacationed there for a whole month of June every year, and they had the place 10 years, never had any incidents. But they weren't there when we were there, and this all started, around September, October time. After we'd been there a few months.
Right.
So, and that's about when, there were blackberries and other things there.
So you think they travel their winter or fall or winter group and come back in the spring when the berry's good and just
Yeah, I think everything, because that's when they're doing a lot of that whole area is farming area, and that's when they've got they aren't actually harvesting corn, but they have corn that they dry out for feed.
Yeah.
So they sit. I don't know how long they sit in the in the fields.
Right.
But they don't pull them up. They already harvest them for people like at the beginning of summer.
Right.
And then it sits out there and dries, and they harvest that to use for animal feed.
Okay. Now, since you started noticing stuff and you started getting into it, how do you go about approaching your area now? When you or your girlfriend goes?
That area, I think part of it, at that time, I didn't really scared at that time. At different hard times we were scared. But one thing that didn't scare me was the fact that a lot of these neighbors already knew about it. And I didn't know anything about it back then. And at that time, I think not everybody knew about it. So it didn't really until a little bit later on. That not a lot of people know about them. We didn't know anything, so I kind of stepped into knowing anything. And for a long time, because I really, a few years later, then I started researching more about them. Partly because I was bedridden, and my son got me a computer, and that's when I really liked them, and then realized how some of these clicked and things, and we did have my girlfriend Jody and I. We did have that kind of. That's a funny story. I'll have to tell you about, but. Yeah, so there's a lot of things. I do situation. Fortunately, I didn't move out. I did move into this situation, and I'm looking to move right now for their ranch.
Okay.
But not as far out as that. So hopefully I will avoid the problem. But knowing what I know now, anything can happen. And I'm a little bit, as far as going in research areas, I've only been in a few times, and my suggestion, I know my area because I've lived here for years. And one of the things I always tell somebody is if you are researching an area that you don't know, one thing is I always suggest is always look into the Native American folklore, of that area, because Indians will tell you by their stories in different areas, there are some areas that they're more aggressive than others, and other areas where they're more, they're less aggressive, depending on the area. The stories tell you everything right there.
Right.
And I think this area where I was at, I didn't know anything about that at the time. And it got a little aggressive, but not towards us. There was a problem with the neighbor. It's kind of a long story I won't get into. But the thing is, I think that these particular ones have been coming there for years. And that they were, the neighbors knew about them. They didn't seem to be threatened by them. They didn't seem to harass the neighbors. And they can be, a big nuisance animal. I mean, they really can, from what I've heard. And they did cause us a little bit of, grief, that freaked us out. But they really didn't hurt us, but it hurt us in a way that made us scared.
Right.
And I think they were just kind of what they call messing with us. But at the time, I just couldn't wait to leave there. I mean, it just got so intense. We left. Our job had been done, and we just left there. And it was just about almost here. It started to get too much, and I just didn't want to be there anymore. And I don't think that because that kind of stuff wasn't happening until we had problems with this goofy neighbor that we didn't even like, and we were given a bad time too. This guy was crazy. I had to call cops on him 3 times. I don't know if it was because of the Bigfoot or if he was just something was wrong with him. That was another thing going on, and he kind of contributed to us wanting to move. Because when he moved away, some other idiots moved in there, and so I just said, I've had enough around here. But anyway, so that kind of showed me, and then I think I contacted you. We went out one day with a group of people who have a little bit more experience than me, and we went up to an area that supposedly we were, given, given a tip on, and we just got like 5 minutes out of the parking lot. It was like 7 in the morning, real foggy and eerie looking, and I couldn't believe that there would be any Bigfoots in this particular area. I won't say where it's at. And oh my God, we surprised something or whatever, and we were just pelted with all kinds of, I mean, the tree is shaking, and I'm not talking like a little 6-inch slim tree. I'm talking a huge tree, like this, like somebody is trying to push it down with a bulldozer. I mean, it shook the ground so bad.
You must have come. You must have come.
It just, you know, we just laughed.
Yeah, you must have come across a big male.
I had told you about that one.
Yeah, y'all must have come across a big male.
Yeah, and I actually think it might have been a juvenile or whatever, but it was pretty freaking scary. And I think 3 of the people with me, including my granddaughter. and I said, you know what, I'm not going in. You know, that's more than, you know, a little warning. You know, and growls.
Yeah, have you?
And you can feel, and it's not the type of growl that, you know, it's the type you can feel go run through your body.
Yeah.
And we just kind of backed, and I said, don't run. We wanted to run. I mean, literally wanted to run. And I said, just back slow, and don't take your eye off of that spot, you know. And we got into the cars, and we just left out of there. And they did go back another time, but they didn't have any, you know, couldn't find anything. And so I didn't go back the second time. But also, you know, I didn't really research into the area before going into it, you know, about, you know, I'm a little hesitant to go to places that are unfamiliar, and I've spent a lot of years going through the park. I used to ride my horse to one of the parks locally.
Right.
And also I've done where I was up at Ice House, which is up by Tahoe area, delivering, this was years ago, delivering supplies to hunters, way out, you know. And I hadn't had any type of experiences like I've had since I got into this.
All right, well, let me ask you a question. I ask every researcher this I come across. In your opinion, from what you've read and researched or whatever, do you think Bigfoot or Sasquatch is Gigantopithecus, or do you think he's a human hybrid?
I think neither. I think I don't think there's a way it could be a human hybrid. Possible it's Gigantopithecus, but I'm honestly thinking it's a species within itself.
You mean like
I don't think it's human, but you know, I think it's a primate. By the way, we are primates, so it could be a primate similar to humans, but a different species. Can't be human because human is a species, you know. And I don't think it has a lot of primate characteristics too, but I can't say that that's it. I think it's a species within itself. I don't think it can be categorized.
Okay, now
in either way.
Right now the Squatches that I've come across, and I've seen.
This is what I've learned, not what I saw.
Yeah.
What I saw, what I encountered, to me was a primate, because I've seen him on all fours. I've seen him standing up, and it seemed to me more primate-ish because of the body build.
All right, have you looked at the? All right, now the ones in my area. Now,
yeah, and that's just.
Now the one.
That was back then. That was way back in, since then, and the more I'm learning, I'm thinking this is a different species.
Okay, now the ones in my area, when you look at them, is like looking at a human.
Mm-hmm.
And they do speak a language. Now the ones.
Oh, I know they do.
The ones around here speak ancient Cherokee dialect.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what makes me think that they're a human hybrid, everything you got, they got. Everything I got, they got. They walk on two legs. Now I had one walk out in front of me in '81. He walked out. The second one that I seen come out in front of me was on all fours. I thought it was a bear until he stopped in the middle of the road and stood up. But I got two groups. I got one with hair on her face, and I got one without hair on her face.
Yeah.
Two of the set of twins I got a set of cinnamon blonde girls. They're about my height now, and a set of black boys. Their coats look like shiny as a Labrador Retriever, but they don't have hair on their face, but their face is black.
Yeah, see, these particular ones, although the only one we really got to see, I only got to see the face, was at a good, good, was a male that was black, and he had minimal hair on his face.
Right.
The cheeks and eyes, were, and the mouth was so large, almost from ear to ear. He grimaced like a smile, but it was a grimace. Definitely a grimace.
You mean he grinned at you?
He, like gritted his teeth, and I was focused on the face, which I know I shouldn't have been, but it was just, I wish I would have taken a look at other parts, just, and that was the only time. And we had the three, but I'm going to tell you right now, I think there were a lot more than those just weren't, were these particular three, I think, basically you heard them and saw a flash of them.
They are extremely fast.
They were the only ones who seemed to come around where people were, where people were habited.
Right.
And like I said, and the funny thing I do have to mention this was a few years ago, my last training thing, I was in a different part of California, a place called Clements, which is really well known for Bigfoot sightings. They even have a radio station that constantly plays, they make announcements of sightings, and that's a highway for big trucks along there.
Yeah.
And anyway, I've been going there. I've gone there a few years, and I never really talked to the owners about 80 years old. And he has a big ranch, and we have like maybe 30 employees there. And I went there to work. Anyway, I don't know how we got into talking to her about it. And they happened to have, she had a story about, she had food on their property, but she says they're there all year round. And I go, well, there's probably more than three. And she had an interesting story to tell me about that. And, one of the things that she did is she is from Montana. She never had any experiences. And she said, until she moved here and her in-laws owned the place, and when her husband took it over, they would talk about it at the table when they talk about certain part of their property. They own 3 ranches up there.
Right.
And they're really pretty well known. I don't want to mention the name, but they're pretty well known people. And anyway, she says, funny thing, she says, we have cattle running on one side of that ranch. And she says, we don't have hardly any predator kills. And there's bears, and there are cougars here.
You got coyotes?
My in-laws say it's because of, they even had a name for him, and I don't remember right offhand. I wrote it down in my journal because I had taken an interview kind of quickly when I was there, because this happened after after I had recuperated. And she said, she said, I thought they were giving me a bad time because, I'm from Montana. And she says, I'm a country girl. I grew up on a cattle ranch. And she says, and then one day she went for a ride with the cattle. They were going out there to do something. And she says, we spent a lot of times out there camping. I mean, because we can't go on regular camping trips, so we just camp on one of the properties because it's close to home if something happens. We have a lot of animals and livestock. You can't really go away from home, and they had kids,
Yeah.
that grew up on those ranch and everything. Right. And she said, so one day they were, going out there for whatever reason, and she said she got a sighting of one, and the ranch had said, oh yeah, and then after that she realized these were real. And she says, that's her father-in-law claimed, and I've heard, back east in different areas, that they've killed livestock and stuff. But she says they claim that, that they live on the property and hunt the deer that come through and whatever on the property, and they don't go after their livestock ever. And she says it's been like this for years. And he says when we go out there and kill a deer, we leave the entrails and everything. He says because my father leaves it for them, and it's just interesting because I know this one for years, and we never ever talked about that.
Do you
somehow it came up, and I go, she goes, well, it's not something we talk about here because we have enough problems because we're near our properties near the highway with transients going in and camping. We're trying to keep people off of our property. And she says, and it's kind of, it's kind of a thing now. And when people hear that they see house sighting everywhere, she says, I've got to worry about my animals being harassed or poached or whatever. And she says, and it's getting, it's been a hassle for years because of where we're located, And I go, well, I understand that part. But, there was more into the story, but I had gotten a story from her. And I've talked to a few people, and, through the years, people are opening up about their stories they haven't, told.
That's good.
And it's pretty interesting, So.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you have an assumption to what you think why they don't bother their livestock? Do you think there's a lot of food sources like deer, elk?
I think that particular area, yes. I think that particular area, yes. Where I was in Fort Bragg area, in Mendocino, up in that area, you couldn't really have chickens and stuff. Just always getting, my girlfriend's friend didn't have any animals there because of the fact that they were there except for 1 month a year. So they bought a place for retirement, I guess, and they have horses, so they like to bring the horses where they are. And it's also near a water source that her husband likes to go boating. So they had bought it years before, and it was a beautiful place. I mean, it just that's what they have it for. And although now California has really changed a lot. We're in such a terrible drought, and I know you've heard about the big fires we've had here. In both places that I live, one was in Clear Lake. I used to live in Spring Valley. There was a big fire close by there that devastated it really bad. I didn't get to see it. Other places where my ranch is in Calaveras County, the branches on both sides of me burned down, and mine wasn't touched, except for all my fencing was down. It's a rental.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a lot of like I think it's 55,000 acres there.
Yeah.
It's land. It's not, I mean, just a small area of houses, which is actually large. How many houses were burned? It's unbelievable. But I mean, a large piece of forest land was burned there. Yep. So we're having some problems.
Yeah, I heard that that main lake, I think it was outside of LA or something, is almost bone dry. The main water source.
All of them here.
Do what?
All of them here. Up at Folsom, that lake is. I posted pictures of it. Is like puddles. It's scary here. I mean, it's really scary. Californians, they don't even know what's going on. They're just kind of trying to be oblivious to our situation here. But it worries me because of the fact that now, I mean, the areas where I go hunting and fishing is only about 2 hours away where our hunt club is. Where we've got the trailer. And the thing is, if I want to go out, I mean, and really look, I think I'm going to have to start going out further now because the areas around here have all been pretty much devastated. I mean, my family where I'm staying right now is basically city. And then we're having coyote problem. We've never been had any wildlife, here and into everything. And we're having problems right now. And I think it's all because of no water, no food sources. The creeks here, leading right to our street, as a matter of fact, just up the street, is a huge creek that runs all the way down through to the ocean here. And it's dried completely. And it's never been completely dried.
How much rain?
Before, it's gone.
How much rain have y'all gotten in the last month?
None. Not in this particular area. Not once.
So y'all
rained or even drizzled. I mean, it's been like summer weather right now. October is supposed to be our start of a little bit of rain.
Right.
And like right now, I'm sitting outside in the front porch, and it's nighttime. The street lamps are on, and it's like maybe 70 degrees. It's warm.
Wow. All right, we got about 10 minutes left here, so I'm going to whiz through some questions here for you, okay? All right. What would be a good tip for, say, like a beginner if they really wanted to get into squatching, say, like in your area or at the closest national forest area?
If you're going out for the first time, by yourself, I would suggest getting to know other researchers or other people, enthusiasts, hobbies, I don't care who they are, who already have experience and have gone out. I mean, I'm not suggesting that these people, researchers are really protective about their areas, and they have good reason to be, because it can be ruined by just one wrong, you know as well as I do.
Yeah, I had
But as far as, it's always good, no matter what you do, to have an experienced person, who's had some experience and knows the area. If it's best not to go in areas that that there aren't people. And there's plenty of areas that are well known for, depending on what state you live in.
Yeah, I had to.
Most parks, it could take you years to get an encounter, and you have to know what you're looking for, and it always helps to have somebody to show you the ropes, so to speak. Like you do, like you've done in the past.
Yeah. Now, when I started in my area, I had one walk out in front of me, 5 feet in front of me back in '81. I had one in '86, a female. Then I had a young, in human age, probably about 18 or 19, walk out in front of me, and I've got juveniles that follow me all the time, But but I tell people when you go in the woods, well, people ask me, how do you know so much about Bigfoot? It's very simple. They leave the information there. You just got to learn how to decipher it.
Exactly. And that's not something everybody's going to know.
It takes time to
even
do
if you have experience in the woods, you're not going to know what to look for that. It's because they are very elusive. They are very elusive about leaving signs. It's one thing to track a deer, when it's been shot and you've been there, and then to see any evidence of these creatures. I mean, it's there. It's there. It's definitely there. You just have to learn what to look for, and it helps to have somebody show you the ropes.
Exactly.
Because we humans in our situation are so desensitized to our own senses. I mean, people can, something can walk right by you and you wouldn't even know it. Happens all the time.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, I'm talking anything. I mean, be it, a deer can pass by you and not even be detected. It's I mean, we were born with it, but through the years, all of ancestors, it's through every evolution, we've desensitized ourselves to so much that that we don't see these things, and that's kind of sad in a way, because we really. I think it's with all the animal world. It's not just this situation.
Okay, what would you do if you was just riding your horse, just taking a daily ride, and you had one step out, say about 50 yards in front of you, and stand there and look at you, and then turn around and walk away?
I would just probably stand there and awe if my horse didn't freak out.
Would you try to walk toward it?
Well, that to me doesn't seem something threatening. I might try to. I might continue on. If I was scared, maybe I would turn around and head back. But that's not a threatening move, and I would think that it would be going on its way, and it wouldn't care that I was going on my way. But nowadays, I would love to go. I would probably go where it was standing and look for a track. I've seen tracks, but I have never cast one, and that's my next goal. Next time, I'm going to start casting more of them. Because I just never felt that I used to do that, but it'd be nice just to have at least.
Right. All right. One last question.
Collection with my other crap that I have.
Right. All right. One last question. What is your main goal in life when you go squatching? What's the one thing that you hope to accomplish in your research for Bigfoot or with Bigfoot?
What would really be incredible, but I couldn't hope for it, would be some sort of communication.
That's everybody's thing, yeah.
I don't care if you're proving it, because I don't think you can prove it to anybody until they actually had the experience themselves. And I would love to get a picture, but I'm the crappiest picture taker in the whole wide world. It's in my DNA. My mom figure out every time she takes a picture, and mine come out blurry.
Well, you see,
people live on my profile pictures that are selfies. I mean, I would love to do that.
Well, you
face it, I'm not capable of doing that. So I would like to somehow else maybe get some DNA through ear samples, I love that. Um, now I know to look for those. I never thought about looking for those. But in fact, the print, I've seen prints many times. And, but my biggest thing, what I would love to see if, if I could get in some sort of communication with,
Yeah. Well, I was.
Work with animals. It would be something very exciting, even if it lasts 2 minutes. 2 minutes is a long time, really. That would be incredible. But, and I've made eye contact and then it's gone. And so there was no communication except for that I see you, see me, and that's it. I want more than that. I think what happens is you're always wanting more than you got.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's what keeps people from going. I mean, and I'm scared. I'm scared as much as anyone else. But it's like an adrenaline thing. You've got to get back out there and do it again. See if you can get a little bit further. See if you can get, push the button a little bit more.
Exactly.
And you've got to be careful because they don't think like us. And one wrong move, can really, not be a good thing. Because I'm just yet to figure out they're so different than anything else I've ever worked with. I've trained other animals and exotics, in fact, and I've never, they're just what I've learned from others and what I've had experience myself. How they think is not like human and not like ape. They're their own kind of creature. It's different.
So you think
they're
they're
still figuring it out after all these years.
So you think
I'm still hoping somebody will figure it out and tell me.
Yeah. So you think they're the missing link?
No, I don't.
You don't.
No.
Okay.
I think they've been around and we've already known about it. I mean, it's obvious by scriptures and Indian, drawings. They have been around a long time, probably about as long as us, maybe longer. We don't know.
That's definitely true.
I mean, I think, time will tell and we will find out. It may not be in our lifetime, but, we will find out. I mean, they're testing giant bones right now that they're finding everywhere. They're turning up everywhere now. For years we couldn't find any of that stuff. Actually, they did find stuff years ago. So I think it's an ongoing mystery, and, I got into this really in the cryptids, not just Bigfoot, and then I just went along with the Bigfoot because there's just too much to learn, and I figured I better stick to one subject, but, it's really the community has grown almost 100-fold since I started. It's just unbelievable, and how fast it has. And I mean, we're learning stuff from people every day. So that's basically, I just keep quiet and I just listen, and I ask questions later.
There you go. Okay, we've come to the end of the show. Laura, you stay on the line.
Yeah, I'll be here.
Okay, cool. Okay, and that was our interview with Lorianne Dovali, who has some very informative information. And I hope the beginners will listen and learn from other researchers, me, Lori, ECBRO, the whole 9 yards. Okay, so in the show, my name is Fred Caney. If y'all want to check out my link, my YouTube link is Freddy59100. I run Valley Bigfooting and Inside Virginia Squatch. And if you want more information, go to Daniel Benoit's website at ECBRO98. That's his YouTube, I think. Well, he's got a bunch of them, so get on there. So anyway, y'all have a good night, and I'll see y'all next week. Thank you.